In this video, I'm going to react to episode 6, the finale of Game of Thrones. This will contain spoilers for the entire series, so if you've not watched it all, click away now. Otherwise, let's begin. But start by subscribing so you can get all our Game of Thrones analysis. Alright, so I've made several videos about the leaks. The leaks from Throwaway were 100% true in this episode as they were in episodes 3, 4, and 5. And if you'd watched those earlier ones, you would have expected what came. But I still, plot leaks are plot leaks. But I found this episode compelling, and I thought it came off much better on the screen than it did in writing. And so the effect of Tyrion and his resigning his hand. I really liked the intro where we saw the horrors of the war, the dead children, the burned men, up close and personal, not from a faraway action-packed perspective, but from a slow, awful perspective. Now, you really got the impression that Dany was more a Khal than she was a ruler of Westeros. That, I think that the Dothraki had more a history of burning cities that did not open their gates, and I think she was kind of in line with that. And so maybe we could justify her Mad Queendom as part of the cultural heritage that she had with being a Khaleesi versus being a Westerosi. And so that I think, one of the historical points that I think people have made is that Genghis Khan did burn cities. He did punish cities that did not surrender quickly, and that was very much in the books of A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin, that the Dothraki did the same. And so maybe that we should not see her as necessarily mad, but coming from a very different cultural heritage of the Dothraki and not the Westerosis. And so you had this kind of Stalinist or Hitler-like rally, which was conducted in Valyrian and Dothraki, not the common tongue. And so it's not even clear that Tyrion and Jon could understand what she was saying, although they seemed to get her meaning that she planned conquest for all. And, I think the notable thing was she said Winterfell was one of the places she planned to conquer. And I'm not sure from the dialogue that either Tyrion or Jon got that. So, as predicted in the leaks, Tyrion did throw down his hand of the queen pin. He was arrested, and Jon did see him, and Tyrion was able to convince him. Although I think the leaks did try to make the case that Jon was convinced because of the threat to his family. And I don't think that was necessarily that. If it was a very small part of what Tyrion was convincing. Most of it was that Tyrion convinced him that he had to act now to save the lives of others. And, they talked about the vows, and Maester Aemon's talk about putting duty before love and the importance of that as a night watchman. He did, in the end, stab her. I think, I misinterpreted the leaks. The leaks never specified what weapon Jon would use to kill Dany. He used a dagger. Obviously, that would have been easier than using Longclaw, and that was what he did. It was also not the cat's paw dagger, very clearly. You could look at the handle, and that was not the cat's paw dagger of Arya. Arya retained that. The sequence with Arya was interesting. Arya confronted Jon. I think you have to interpret that sequence as Arya was in some sort of disguise, or was somehow being able to hide in the shadows through some sort of faceless man magic, and otherwise she would have obviously been seen and caught where she was. But Jon did confront her, and that maybe stiffened his resolve. So, I like the whole thing with Grey Worm. I think I liked the council a lot more than I thought I would. I was surprised that Tyrion was the one presenting the case for making Bran the king. That was kind of funny, with Edmure Tully trying to nominate himself. And it was also kind of a funny moment where Sam said that we should not just have a election of the major lords. We should have election of the people. And then Jan Roy says, well, can my horse vote? And then they all laugh. So they weren't ready for pure democracy, but a movement towards more representative democracy they were willing to do with a lifetime king, but one that couldn't nominate his heirs. It was clear that they made it clear that Bran could not father children, but if they nominated a future king, even though he may be barred from having his children take the office, you would think a future king might install that. But maybe by that time, representative democracy or constitutional monarchy will be better established after Bran's death. I bought it. I think it was a bittersweet ending. And I said this in the earlier video that who we loved in season 1 was not Dany. It was the House of Stark, right? It was the Starks we were rooting for, and the House of Stark came up on top here, and hopefully they're making a better, more stable Westeros after the end of this. It did come to pass that Bronn did get his Highgarden that was in the leaks. I thought that would happen for sure because there was really nobody else. Although Tyrion offered, or I don't know if it was Tyrion, but the reach was offered to the Unsullied, and Grey Worm declined it. Grey Worm said when he sailed off that they were going to the island of Narth. So they were not going to conquer slave cities, but rather maybe stop the slave trade in Narth by having a protective force with, I guess, Grey Worm and his Unsullied as that protector. So overall, I think, the ending I found satisfying. I think if you maybe not heard the leaks and not believed the throwaway leaks, you might have found it very surprising and maybe disappointing that you wanted maybe Jon to be king. I think it was clear from the series that Jon never wanted to be king, that he was happiest up north. We got to get the action with Jon and Snow, or Jon and Ghost, his direwolf Ghost, and they got to pet and reunite, and Jon reunited with Tormund and the Wildlings. And they did bring up all the things that everybody else has said, is that there's really not a need for Night's Watch, the wall is down, etc., etc. And it wasn't clear that there was really anything much of a Night's Watch except for Tormund and his Wildling followers, and it seemed like that was what Jon joined in the far north. And they started out and they ended in the woods where we started in the woods with the White Walkers. We did not see a White Walker, so we have no reason to believe they are there. For those that want to see more White Walkers, I think you should be very excited about the Bloodmoon series, the prequel of the Age of Heroes about 5,000 years prior to Game of Thrones, which should be coming out. My guess would be in a year. They've already started filming the pilot, starring Naomi Watts. And, I think you'll get more White Walker action in that. And they have definitely previewed it. HBO has, that you will get more information about the White Walkers. I think in the end, none of this will ever get a lot of information. It'll always be vague, right? In the same way that we never found out what Varys saw in the flame when he was mutilated as a boy, or what he heard in the flame. It's left up to our imagination, which I suspect will be in the story in the Age of Heroes about the long night called Bloodmoon. But hopefully it will be good characterization, an interesting story, and a compelling tale, the way that all 8 seasons of Game of Thrones has. I think the season 8 has been the worst reviewed, both by the critics and by the people watching it. I thought, in terms of the narrative, I thought the narrative was better in episode 6 than it was in episode 5. I didn't believe the turn of Dany, but I think they shored it up a little bit better, and I was able to understand where Dany was coming from and how she was thinking about things. I just was not thinking of her as, a Khal, and she was a Khal. She was a Khaleesi. She was not a Westerosi leader, and she thought about things differently. It wasn't that she was necessarily mad, but she had cultural practices that we would find abhorrent and that were found abhorrent by Mira Mazdor, who tried to kill Khal Drogo, and it ended up birthing dragons. Okay, I wanted to just comment on the whole Nissa Nissa Azor Ahai thing. So I think that the way that you interpreted, because we never saw the flaming sword of Lightbringer, they were both daggers in this case. You can say the Night King was the husband of Arya, that she was in love with death, and you can say that Daenerys was the wife of Jon Snow. They were lovers, and they were both Azor Ahai reborn. And I really like the theme. I think we might see a postquel, a spin-off of Game of Thrones with Arya and her adventures to the west. That seems like something that they may be setting up in addition to the Blood Moon, which is supposed to give us the original story of Nissa Nissa and Azor Ahai. Subscribe so you can get any analysis of the upcoming prequels or content that is of interest to Game of Thrones viewers.